Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Wedding Ceremony Podcast. We talk about anything and everything that has to do with wedding ceremonies. My name is Clint Huft, and with me is a gentleman that, well, he's intrigued and engaged, the one and only JP Reynolds.
I'm not sure you should be using the word engaged on this podcast. That's very specific. I'm engaged, no, but I am engaged with you. So,
The beauty of the English language. If you're joining us for the first time, the reason this podcast exists is because JP and I are both wedding officiants. We've been doing it for a long time. As you know, if you're in the business, every wedding is unique. JP is an accomplished author. He's written books about wedding ceremonies, how to do them, how to prepare for them. And those books are in the Amazon store and in the Kindle store in Amazon. Plus, he is a communications expert. Thebusinessofconfidence.com is that website. His wedding website is jprweddings.com. My website is simply my name, Clint Huff, CLINTHUFFT.com, for all of the things that I do. And before we go any further, I want to acknowledge the people that play the music, our theme music, on the audio podcast. It's the DaCapo Players, DACAPO Players.com. They've been with us since the very beginning. And that is on the audio side, which is in the Apple Podcast Store. Those of you that are watching us on YouTube, welcome. And as you can see, we're lovely people. JP,
oh,
I I
yes.
I was at some kind of a thing where there was a bunch of officiants, very diverse. There was about, I don't know, there's a bunch of us in this room, and this one guy, I said, "How did you come to be an officiant?" He said, "Well, I worked with musicians. I was the guy that set up their equipment, and then I produced shows and that sort of thing." And he had done some touring, and he had worked at events that brought groups in, everybody that's on the charts, everybody that's ever been on the charts. He's pretty much interfaced with all of them. He said, "You're an actor, right?" He was talking to me. And I said, "Oh, no, a long time ago." "Oh, really? You don't do it now?" "No, no, that was a long time ago." As we say, every life is actually a series of past lives. That's what I did a long time ago. And he
By the way,
said,
I've never heard that phrase. I like that though. Yes. Okay. Yes.
That's mine. I just kind of figured that out. Yeah.
I, I like that. I'll wear that on a t-shirt. But yes.
And so he asked me, what did my experience as an actor, how did that inform what I do as an officiant? And I had never really thought about that before. When I was acting, we had to do auditions, and a lot of times we didn't know what we were going to say until we walked into the room. They would hand us a couple of pages of a script, what they call a side, and we didn't get a chance to memorize it. We had to deal with it right there. The only time we had is whatever we were waiting in the hallway to be called in for the audition. And so the technique that I was taught is called sight reading. And that's where you allow yourself to look at the page and then look up, but in your mind's eye, you can still see the words. Okay. And we've all kind of experienced that. And anybody who's watching this that's never tried that, just pick up anything that has words on it and glance down at it and then look up, and your mind will still have a little picture of what those words are. And that's called sight reading. So it turns out that I do that at every single ceremony that I officiate, sight reading, because all of my ceremonies are printed out because, the couple, they're really involved, and I want to make sure that I don't mess it up and that I say exactly what we have to say. But if I'm only reading, then there's a disconnect. I'm not connected to the couple or to anything else that's going on. So it's really important for me to get off the page and be able to look at them. That technique of sight reading has served me really well. And then I started to think about, well, I wonder what JP, because you were a Jesuit priest, right?
Mhm.
And I started to think about, what did JP bring to officiating? Because it's different than what you did, but yet there are things or elements, I'm guessing, that have informed you, or you have techniques that came with you when you started officiating non-denominational ceremonies. Is there something like that you'd like to share?
This is a really interesting arena that you've brought up, which is typical for you. First of all, in terms of my officiating a wedding ceremony today, there's very little difference between how I officiate today, how I officiated as a priest. Everything I learned about ceremony is carried on in the ceremonies I do today. It's not done in a church. More times than not, it's not religious per se. The inner workings, the psychological dynamic, some of what you've been speaking to is the same. It doesn't matter that I'm not in robes. It doesn't matter that I'm not in a Catholic church. The ceremony is the ceremony is the ceremony. At its heart, ceremony is a form of theater. And when we think of theater, oftentimes people say, oh, theater's not real. Theater is fiction, but theater is story. And at its heart, a ceremony, whether it is in a church or on a steamboat, a ceremony is story. And it's not literally simply saying, oh, well, let me tell you now the story of how they met. No, 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 no. It's story. It is a moment in time that is telling a story of two people who have gathered this audience together because they want this audience to be a part of their story and bear witness to what they're about to do. It is ancient. Every wedding ceremony, whether it is at a honky-tonk bar or under ancient elm trees, it is sacred. It is sacred. Ceremony is sacred, whether you believe in a God or you don't believe in a God, because it's ancient. It is so human. What is to be human is to be a storyteller, and ceremony is a form of storytelling. There's my TED Talk.
Okay, you said a few things that just aroused my curiosity. And,
Yes.
and obviously that was very well said because, it's you. What I'm curious about is the idea of ceremony tells a story. When I heard the word story, I immediately thought of the word subtext because what's presented, I always say that the words of the ceremony are only 40% of the ceremony because
Mhm.
there's so many different things that are attached to the event or the ritual. The words are part of it, but everything else is really important. And that includes the subtext. I tell couples when they send me a first draft, I give them a big collection of wedding ceremony components. And I want them to get rid of all the stuff that they know for sure they don't want and send me
Mhm.
whatever's left over. And what I love about my job, there's so many things I love about this job, JP. That's why we've been doing it for so long. One of the things that I love is when they send me the first draft and I say, I don't care how long it is. I don't care how short it is. Let me just see kind of where you're at. I love that feeling of looking at the first draft and saying, oh, I see what they want to do because there's
Mhm.
so much that's revealed. Sometimes they'll say, are you going to tell our story or are you going to get to know us or whatever the case may be? And my response is always, I'll meet with you as many times as you want in person, virtually. I don't care. I just want you guys to feel really comfortable. That's all that matters to me. But I will tell you this, what you're going to reveal to me just through your wedding ceremony is going to be comprehensive. It's amazing how much and how well I'm going to get to know you just by looking at what resonates with you in regards to your wedding ceremony. Does that make sense?
Preeminently. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever used the word preeminently in my life. So I just I just want to acknowledge you for your vocabulary.
It's one of my favorite words. I don't use it often. It's a high compliment. If something is preeminent, props to you, man. Yeah, yeah,
I'll take it
yeah.
as a compliment.
Love it, love it, love it. It's a high endorsement. Yes.
So do you feel that the subtext of the ceremony, all the things that are communicated?
There's all of, I mean, here, so, as you indicated, when I'm not officiating, I'm a communications coach and I'm teaching and doing workshops, whatever. And the reality is, in terms of communication, that it takes place on the verbal and the nonverbal level. But what we most pay attention to is the nonverbal, the body posture, the tone of voice, the look in the eye. A ceremony is a very emotional experience. So much of that emotion is conveyed nonverbally. People are responding, and people can intuit what our relationship is to the couple. Have we connected with the couple? How we are looking at them, how we're standing, how they're looking at us. All of that is just sending loud signals to the audience. And people know, oh, this is some guy that just walked in off the street. I mean, how many times have people wondered, seriously, I mean, couples will say to me, oh, our friends thought you were a friend of the family. They thought I was a friend of the family, or that maybe I worked with one of them, or people just like, oh, you haven't known this guy for years? Because, and I'm sure it's the same for yourself. How do we convey that? That familiarity is conveyed in the warmth of our tone of voice and just the way we stand with them.
The way
And
we stand with them is so important.
yes,
That body language and all that. One of the greatest, I'm so glad you're saying this. One of the greatest compliments that I've ever received was from an event planner who said, it always seems like they're your best friends.
There it is.
And
That's what we're
I
talking
don't really
about.
know. The only thing I can figure out how that's conveyed is that I just have decided that I really like these people and I'm really close to them and I'm going to take care of them, and that all starts, I guess it kind of starts any communication before the wedding day. But on the wedding day itself, sometimes we haven't met them in person. Sometimes, and I'll be honest with you, when I walk in and I see them, maybe the Zoom meeting happened a long time ago. There have been many times where I have said to somebody very quietly, which one is the groom? Because they're all in tuxedos and I'm looking for, is he wearing a different color flower? What's
Right.
going on? But then when I walk up and identify, and they'll recognize me because there's only one of me, as opposed to a room full of people that are all part of a wedding. There's only one of me, and so they recognize me immediately, and that helps me a lot. But when I walk up to them, it is in my mind, I'm thinking, I like this person and I'm going to take care of them. And that kind of relationship is established as quickly as possible. I mean, that's just kind of the way I am. I just feel so lucky that I get to do it. And I'm so happy that these people want me to do it. Now we go back to what did we do before we became an officiant that informs this? I kind of glossed over this, but I think it's really important. The first thing that I said to this guy when he said, you were an actor and so on, what did you bring from that to this? And the very first thing that I said was, well, it forced me to be in the moment because you said that
Mhm.
if you watch somebody, any kind of theater, one of the things that will cause a disconnect almost immediately is if you think they're just performing, that they're not really living it, they're not in the moment. That
Mhm.
it changes everything if you're
Mhm.
in the moment. And so the sight reading thing is a technique to get my eyes up, and but being able to say the words in a way that's relevant to them right now, because I'm sure this is, you found this to be true. You may have said something 100 times in a ceremony, but every time you say it, it's fresh because you're saying it to these people, and it changes the inflection points and it changes the pacing of it, and it makes it happening right now. And I learned all of that by having to bring that feeling into the written word if I was going to, perform it. And so I think I'm lucky in that that also has carried forward as an officiant, is to make this a one of a kind, living, breathing thing that's happening right now for these two people and consequently anybody else that might be emotionally connected. And I learned all of that through acting and all my training.
I have had on occasion after the ceremony people coming up and asking me if I'm an actor.
Oh, really?
Yes, because of the way in which I presented myself, conducted myself, the way in which I conducted the ceremony. Not that it was fake or phony, but that there was it's like, well, wait a minute, this is something distinct that we have just experienced. And it goes back again to what I'm saying, that all ceremony is theater in the deepest, most original understanding of theater. It is about connecting. And that's a psychological issue. And it's about connecting with the couple. It's about connecting with the words. It's about connecting with the spirit of the moment. I tell people, I don't pretend, I'm not going to pretend on the day of your wedding that we're old drinking buddies. When I'm up there, I want people to know that I have not just walked in off the street. I want people to know that we have connected, that we have our own connection, and that I know you. I don't pretend that I know you as well as your college roommate sitting in the fourth row, but I want people to know I'm not the valet.
It'd be awesome if the valet actually dressed the way we dress. That'd be pretty
Well,
cool.
that's candid camera. But this is, I think, what you're talking about. It's about connection. That is why, and tell people, I'm not a wedding factory. I'm not trying to hoover up as many couples as possible. I want to only officiate and work with couples that I want to work with. And I am not the right person for every couple. And that's life. And that first meeting is for me to make sure that, yes, you both exist, that you're not a con artist. And number two, do you want me on your wedding day? And there have been couples who, it's like there wasn't that connection. That's fine. Life goes on. They're married and I'm living my life. But when you connect with somebody, how you present yourself is going to be qualitatively different than if you are speaking to a stranger.
Oh, absolutely. Although
Yeah.
The practice of speaking to strangers like they're friends, just people, if you
Yes.
see something interesting at the grocery store and you say,
Right.
oh, I bought that, or whatever the case may be. In fact,
Right.
that was how I started the conversation with my wife when I first met her on the airplane. I've read that book, just so you know. It works really well.
Yes. But in that moment, even in that moment, you are addressing the person as a person. It is
Yes.
when people arrive and it's, I got a job to do. Okay, where is that woman in the white? I'm looking for a woman in a white dress. Okay, you. And it becomes purely functional. And people pick up when the officiant is simply doing a job.
Well, one of our past guests talked about that. They talked about how it was just kind of a rent a priest type of a deal. And the
Yeah,
officiant showed up and was very cold, had this script and blah, blah, blah. And that was it. And then just scrammed. You know
yeah,
what I mean? There was no after ceremony engagement or any of that kind of stuff. It makes a huge difference. And I've seen that in other aspects of the event industry as well. I was a master of ceremonies for a long time and a DJ for a long time. And again, that also informed what I do. And the thing is, what occurred to me while we were talking about this was, what are you afraid of? Because if you're afraid of something, then that's going to put up walls and everybody will feel the wall. So if you're afraid of being judged, if you're afraid of, because we all know officiants, if they're doing it for the first time, or people that have any kind of thing where they have to speak to a group, if they're afraid of being judged, then they can rely on catchphrases and things that will buffer them from the human to human experience. And it just takes a lot of experience. We have a lot of reps under our belts to get to this. I talked about in a previous episode, having the fundamentals rock solid, almost where you don't have to think about anything of the fundamentals of this job, frees you up to allow for the nuances in the human experience to come forward. And I've seen it in all aspects of anybody that has to address a group of people. If they're afraid of being judged or whatever, then immediately there's a wall that goes up. I think we're very fortunate that we passed that barrier a long time ago, and that allows the human connection to come forward.
You have said this. I hope that I've said this. You, me, we love what we do.
Yep.
And we love what we do because now let me get on this week of Valentine's Day really sappy. We love people. We love people and we love stories. And it's that love that guides and informs and grounds what we do. Guests attending a wedding can sense that this is not a quote job, but this is a relationship of some kind. And this is a celebration. And that is what people tap into and respond to. When people look at it as simply a job, simply signing on the dotted line, that impacts then the overall quality of the experience.
Absolutely. I was talking to a room full of officiants, and afterwards, one of them came up, and she is from a different part of the country. And she was talking about how she started this officiant business, and then she hired somebody that was bilingual to do bilingual ceremonies. And she said, I just gave her a script, and anybody can read a script. And that all kinds of warning bells went off in my head. I said, I understand what you're saying. What I'm concerned about is, where's the heart? I said, I understand that you can give this to somebody and they can just read it, but we're talking about two people that are getting married and everybody that's connected to them. I hope that we don't lose the heart of what's happening, which I think we're all saying, you and I are both saying the same thing, that's we love, and without a heart, you know what I mean? Then
Well, it's I'm moved by people's stories.
mhm.
And I will say how I begin every conversation when I meet with a couple in person or on Zoom. All right. I am shameless. I really am shameless. And usually my opening line is, well, wow, you look like an engaged couple. And people always smile and they've now, it's like, oh, yeah. It's like, I say, you look like an engaged. How long have you been together? How did you meet? And I express, and I am genuinely curious before we talk about anything. I want to know, how long have you been together? How did you meet? And how people tell me their story, who tells it, how they interact with each other as they're telling it. That's how I learn and get an insight into who these people are.
I love that you begin with you look like an engaged couple. I love that you bridge the gap immediately because
Yeah.
my approach is totally different. Now I'm starting to rethink, what am I doing the right thing? Because my first thing is, okay, you guys jump right in. Tell me what you want. Tell me what you don't want. Just lay it all out there. Let's go. And then eventually, if I'm curious, then I'll say, how did you meet? But that's after we've talked about anything that they're worried about or concerned
Oh,
about.
Clint,
But you bridge the
my
gap
man,
immediately.
my man. Now, there are times when I will look at a couple and I'll think, how did you decide to get married? Like you look on Zoom, it's like, here, give me 6 months. I'll be your wingman at a bar on a Friday night. But for the most part, 99.9% of the time, I look at the couple and they're nervous because they don't know who I am.
Right.
They don't know who we are. And it's like, is this guy, their concern is this guy a jerk?
Yep.
So I just smile and I say, wow. I said, well, you look like and no matter where, and they're always, Zooming. That's what I love about Zoom now, is that it's in their familiar setting.
Right.
You look like how long, and I am genuinely interested, and that comes out of my tone of voice. Like, how long have you been together? How did you meet? And then how they answer that question, it breaks the ice. It gives me insight, and we can laugh because you're always laughing about the story of how they met. There's always humor regarding it. Like I say to them, well, I'm going to be like a doctor. I have a list of questions to ask you. And I said, no matter how odd the question, it is based in past experience. One of the questions I ask is, everybody happy?
I love that question. I
Look at me.
love that question.
Everybody happy? They'll say, oh, everybody's happy. I'll say, well, you are really lucky because not everybody who gets married is surrounded by happy people. I said, you are ahead of the game. And they laugh. It breaks the ice. All right. Or it's, well, no, actually, nobody's happy for us. And we're hiring security for the wedding. And then I'll say, do you know what you want? Do you know what you don't want? Have you been to a wedding and you saw something that you liked? Have you been to a wedding and you saw something you didn't like? That gets them talking. And by the end of my conversation with them, I will have proposed a ceremony outline, and I will mail that to them afterwards. And it's like, all right, here's your ceremony outline. And oftentimes there's, things for them to consider. Maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't, whatever. At the end, my hope is that they've had a warm, funny, informative conversation with me that has gotten them thinking. What is it that they want this moment to be?
I like it a lot. I think the message that I'm getting, the subtext, if you will, JP, is how much you care about them, how much that's communicated, as opposed to I'm Mr. Bossy Pants and you're going to, my way or the highway, how much you care about them. And that supports everything that we've been talking about, is that connection. It also, I want to go back full circle to the beginning. Anybody who has decided they would like to be an officiant, I think it's okay to look back at all of their experiences and say, what have I experienced that I can bring into this job? Knowing that you're not going to know everything. We don't know what we don't know. And that's why you iterate as you go along through each experience. But I think it's valid to say, well, I was a plumber, and so customer service is important to me, and I know how to talk to people. That all of that comes into play in regards to the job that we do. Whatever your experience or whatever your background is, there's got to be things that will relate directly to being an officiant.
Right.
All right, we're out of time. JP, how can people get in touch with you?
My website is jprweddings.com. It's a nice, easy way to get a hold of me, and my social media can be found. Links to it can be found on that website, and one-stop shopping.
There you go. One-stop shopping. I like that for the store that is JP Reynolds. All right. Remember that he is also an accomplished author. We've talked about wedding ceremonies, and as you can see, he's given a lot of thought to everything that's connected to a wedding ceremony, including if you have been asked to perform as an officiant. All those books are in the Amazon store and in the Kindle store in Amazon. Plus, if you're looking for a communications coach, or perhaps at your work or whatever, thebusinessofconfidence.com is that website for JP. And as he's already said, jprweddings.com is his wedding website. My website is simply my name, Clint Huff, CLINTHUFFT.com, for all of the things that I do. And once again, thank you to the Da Capo players for playing our theme music on the audio side. That's it for this episode of the Wedding Ceremony Podcast. This is Clint, and on behalf of JP, we will see you next time.